Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italian travel podcast, or, as we're starting to call it, the Guide to Italian Travel. I'm adjusting still to that new title. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Mellor, even though I think we both had a hand in creating that new title. Like, it wasn't just me.
No,
Okay.
definitely not. I also helped.
I'm often the one who's like messing things up for the group, and then we're like,
yeah, I just can't
Nathaniel,
remember it.
do you change it again? Because I'm thinking about, I keep talking about changing the Instagram name, so it's not only _a_bag, because that's kind of like confusing, because there are like 3 different names. So I'm like, oh, I'll do like Only a Bag podcast, but then I realized it doesn't help.
Because
It's
still a different
name. It's still confusing.
Fundamentally doesn't change anything.
So we saw the same fundamental issues. So all that being said is, yes, it's, what is it? The Guide to Italian Travel.
Yes.
I think we were going to be your guide to Italian travel, but like that's coming across like really strong.
That was a little aggressive.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, it begins and ends with us. So what are we talking about today? Literally minutes after we finished the last podcast.
So we're going to do a bit of a quick deep dive. Well, y'all know us. It's not going to be that quick. But a quick little deep dive into some of the classic Italian aperitivo drinks.
And you will be our guide on this journey.
I will, yes. Thank you for joining me.
I'm very excited. Darcy has done some research on these, so I am not clueless, but like, well, I was going to make another 90s movie reference, but honestly, I feel like that's, I don't know. I don't know.
You're not a mean girl either? I don't know. That's the only, it's not necessarily the same time period, but it came to mind. So, before we get into it, we just want to say thank you, as always, to everybody who likes and follows and leaves us reviews. It is incredibly nice of you, and it makes us personally very happy, but it also professionally helps us to be more established as a podcast. And we really appreciate that.
And thank you. I was gonna say too, like, I know that it does, it takes effort to like leave reviews. I know it takes effort to comment. I say that, like, I mean, I watch YouTube videos and I'll have to watch a video like 20 times, not the same video, but like somebody 20 times before I remember to subscribe. Even though it's right there, it's still like, oh God, that's a commitment. Do I want to subscribe?
Even though they're saying like, subscribe, follow.
And I'm like, I don't want to. I don't really want. But I'm like, I'll go and watch all their videos. I just won't subscribe. So, no, I realize it's like that mental block, and I know how difficult it is. And to be like, I don't want to get another email and this and that. So it does mean a lot to us that you follow us, that you do subscribe, that you do put us on reminder. I'm not really sure what else there is for podcasts, but no, it really does mean a lot, because I know that it's like in a world where we're constantly feeling inundated by like, I don't know, like, follow us, create those parasocial relationships. It kind of, it's hard to be like, no, I like you guys. I just don't want to hear about the next podcast. I have my own little system for reminding myself. So no, it just means a lot to us. So thank you all very much for that.
Absolutely. All right. You ready to get into it?
I am ready. I'm prepared.
Okay. So
we are not drinking while this is happening, though. So this is
we
kind
really
of like,
should be. While I was taking notes today, I really wanted an Aperol spritz.
I know, they sound really yummy. I mean, I don't like Aperol.
You don't like them, but
still, they sound really yummy.
I like the occasional one. There's some good ones and some bad ones, and we'll talk about that in a second. Why?
But like,
my
Prosecco,
theory,
girl, you devour that. Like,
I love Prosecco, and I feel so basic as an white American woman.
Drinking Prosecco.
For loving Prosecco, but I just really love bubbles.
Yeah, that's a good point. Bubbly water, beer. You like? I think you drink more beer than you do Prosecco by like.
I like carbonation.
Gallons. Yeah,
I really like the bubbles.
It's healthier than soda, is what we can tell ourselves.
Okay. Well,
I don't think it's remotely true.
Yeah, but it's also probably not a healthy thing to tell myself, justifying it that way. Okay, so Aperol Spritz, hugely popular cocktail in all of Italy. It is bright orange and usually comes in like a big wine glass style with ice. And the original recipe from the Aperol website
Fair enough.
is Prosecco, Aperol, a little bit of soda water, and an orange slice.
On top, like on the rim.
As a garnish.
Okay.
Yes. So let's get into what Aperol is. I'm going to consult my notes.
Paper rustling in the background.
Okay, so Aperol was invented. Ooh, let's play a game. Guess when Aperol, not the Aperol Spritz, but Aperol, the liqueur.
Okay.
When do you think that was invented?
1876.
Oh, that's pretty close.
Okay.
1919.
Okay, so it's off by like 40 years.
Yeah, but you were kind of in the
30.
realm.
That's fair enough. That's very kind of you. Thank you. I will take that.
Okay, so it was invented in 1919 by the Barbieri brothers in Padua in Veneto.
Yeah, it makes sense because Venice created the Aperol spritz, right? You're gonna get into that later.
Yeah, I am.
Well, because I was like, also feels like just in time for the Roaring '20s, like this hot new drink, bright orange from Italy. You know, I'm thinking like Great Gatsby. I'm thinking East Egg, right? He lived in East Egg, West Egg, East Egg.
He lived in one of the eggs. There was green light. Eggs.
Yeah, and he's like just, I mean, sipping like orange colored drinks. I feel like that's the thing. You have aviation cocktails and you have Aperol spritzes. It's the time for heavily colored drinks. 1919. I'm setting the scene for you. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
The Hindenburg. I don't know what year that was. So.
Okay, so here we are, 1919. We're in Padua, in Veneto. The Barbieri brothers. That's Barbieri in my American English accent.
I appreciate that deeply. Thank you. Helps me spell it.
Invented Aperol, the liqueur. But before they invented Aperol in 1919, we're going to go back to the 1800s during the Austro-Hungarian rule of that part of Italy. And there were German soldiers who drank the Italian wine and thought it was too strong.
Oh, the Germans did they?
Yeah. Okay, but having had like homemade Italian wine,
fair enough.
It can be a very potent flavor.
Because I'm like, I think most Italian wines are like a refreshing 11% alcohol.
Yeah. So. Well, and I think it wasn't necessarily the alcohol. It wasn't the alcohol, it was the flavor. Oh. Yeah, it was a very intense flavor, and they were like, that's too much for our German palate. That's
fair, though. That's because a Riesling, I feel like a lot of Rieslings we had are very like, is that even wine? It feels like cold water.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
I'm insulting Rieslings.
And in my research, I didn't find whether it was necessarily, I mean, there is a lot of white wine, obviously, in that region, in northern Italy. I didn't see whether the Austro-Hungarian soldiers were drinking red or white wine, but whatever it was a very intense flavor, and they were like, ooh, that's too much. Let's pull back. Let's put a spritz of water into it.
Well.
I know, to dilute it a little bit. Okay, so spritz comes from the word, I'm going to say this wrong. Sorry, Germans. Spritzen? Spritzen. That was Scottish.
I know, spritzen.
Spritzen. I'm going to say it in American English, which essentially, it has not lots of definitions, but can mean many slightly different things, but it means a splash or a spray. So a little splash of water in your wine, that became the spritz.
To be fair, great word.
I know,
Give it a spritz. Just spritz it. Like plants, flowers.
Yeah. And we totally use that. You're right.
Use it all the time.
Yeah. Thanks,
Love
German.
that word.
Okay, so they had that going on. They were being soldiers. They were drinking their wine with a little bit of water. And then 1919, the Barbieri brothers come along. They invent Aperol, and people kind of start doing the same thing with the Aperol. And then they're using Prosecco because Prosecco is
festive.
It is festive, but it's from very near there.
Okay, fair enough.
Not exactly. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's from near there. Sometimes people will also use, instead of Prosecco, like a dry white wine.
Okay.
Personally, I think that's wrong. The Aperol website also does not suggest that. They just say to use Prosecco. So proper Aperol spritz uses Prosecco, Aperol, soda water, and an orange slice.
I'm realizing with all the Aperols and Proseccos, our pop filters here are putting in a lot of work.
Oh, they really are.
to dim down all the pop. So I apologize for anybody who's like, there's a lot of puh sounds. They are escaping through the pop filters, but we do have them.
Yeah. And it's really fascinating. I mean, I kind of wish I could talk more about the Aperol and Campari, which we'll get into in a second, are very passionate, each of them, about their marketing campaigns.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that today because it's just down a different rabbit hole and we only have so much time. But it's really fascinating to see like how passionate they were, like moving through the ages and how they were marketing themselves.
Well, it kind of makes sense. I mean, it has, in some level, it makes sense because we're thinking like 1919 would have been, Italy is 30 years old as a country at that point.
Yeah.
So there's not really a national drink at that point besides like coffee, maybe. So I'm just thinking you're kind of on this cutting edge of like, we can make, Aperol the drink of Italy. And Campari probably had the same thought. Because I know that, if I'm not mistaken, Aperol is like is a secret formula still.
Yeah, I believe so.
It's one of those
they don't they definitely don't publicize what's their special thing. No. Because
I know that it's a lot of the Amaros, we mentioned this in one of the episodes, they're a bunch of mixes of herbs and dried things. Like I know that Aperol uses like sweet and bitter oranges. They use rhubarb, a few things like that. But they're like, we're not going to tell you what it is and how much is in there. And which I think, if I may, is all to say, if you're allergic to anything like that, probably don't have Aperol.
Yeah.
Just in case, like, if there's something you think you're allergic to that might be an Aperol or Campari, it might be best to avoid it because they don't release what's in their drinks.
Certainly, if you know you're allergic to bitters, Aperol's not technically a bitter, but it is, like you said, made with lots of ingredients and I don't know if it has herbs, but definitely different citruses and plants and things like that. And Campari is certainly made with herbs, so it is hard to know what's in it. And if you have a sensitivity, just be careful.
Yeah.
And before we move on to our next one, which is Campari, so basically to compare, Aperol is sweeter than Campari. Campari is quite bitter. Aperol should be sweet and a little bit bitter. And sometimes bartenders will instead of using a dry Prosecco, they'll use a sweet Prosecco, which makes it quite a bit sweeter. And to me, it's like, is it saccharine? Is that the word?
Yeah, like cloying.
Yeah,
saccharine.
it's too much. And sometimes there should be more Prosecco than Aperol in the drink. And sometimes they'll do the opposite, and then it gets kind of syrupy, and that's not as good.
Aperol is kind of, and I think even Campari, they're basically flavored simple syrups, to be polite.
Well, I mean, kind of. I mean, it is in that it is like ingredients with a lot of sugar, just in a water type substance.
Yeah, simple syrup.
But it's so much more than that. Like, there's so many ingredients in both of these liqueurs that are not just one thing in sugar.
I think Campari and Aperol have both just dropped us as potential sponsors, or the other way around.
Excuse me, I think I saved it.
Aperol, please.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to Campari. So Campari is an Amaro or bitter. I mean, it's a bitter, but I think of it as an Amaro, which means bitter. Okay, so let's go back to our game.
I love this game.
Okay. When do you think Campari was invented?
I would guess that it's older than Aperol. Darcy gave me a look that's like, oh, that's dead wrong. But I'm going to go back to 1875. I was so lucky the first time. I was 30 years off the first time.
Final answer?
Yeah.
Okay. 1860.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm. So my face was not, you're dead wrong. My face was like, wow, nice.
Okay.
Like, good job. Okay. So it was invented.
Okay.
I know, right? It's much older than I
Well,
I
it's
would have
much
thought.
older for having you just think it has a 55-year advantage on Aperol. And yet Aperol has, partly because it's sweeter, but it's, sorry, I guess I'm thinking, I don't know how old Pepsi is. I'm assuming it's younger than Coke. But there's still like kind of a Pepsi versus Coke. I know, me either. But it's like in my head, it's like Coke's, whatever that is. I have no idea. I'm not even going to guess how old these things are. But it's like, there's always that kind of classic Pepsi versus Coke. And Pepsi's a little sweeter. Coke's a little bit more bitter. And I think Campari and Aperol are kind of the same thing, where it's like Campari is the bitter one, Aperol's the more sweet one, but yet somehow, unlike Coke and Pepsi, Aperol seems to have like more name recognition, at least that like
Marketing.
I know, it's crazy, right?
Okay, wait, let me drop some knowledge on you now. I don't know if this contributes to it, but it might.
Okay.
Guess who owns Aperol?
Is it going to be somebody super depressing? I hope not.
No.
Okay.
Almost a trick question.
Oh, I'm terrified to answer.
Campari.
Interesting.
So Campari bought
I think I see something like
Aperol.
Elon Musk, so it's like, God, please don't tell me.
No. Campari owns Aperol now.
Recently or no? Like recently, last like 30 years, 40 years?
Look it up and be sure. But I only say that because their modern day websites and marketing are very, very similar, and you can tell that they are within the same family essentially. But individually, I believe before Aperol was acquired, they both did have, like we said, really strong marketing campaigns. But Campari is older, and I'll get into in a minute. Campari, I think, maybe is used in things that we don't think about, where Aperol is mostly used in Aperol Spritz.
In Aperol Spritz, okay.
But Campari has, I took a great marketing class, and I should know the term for it, but they have like a wider reach, even if you don't know it's in the drinks necessarily, until I'm about to drop this knowledge on you. They are in very many drinks, so they have a pretty big reach.
That makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. So I'm ready. Drop some knowledge.
Okay. So it was invented, like we said, in 1860 by Gaspare Campari.
Okay. Named after himself. Love it.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, as people do.
He also had a son, I believe. I don't have it written down, but I think his name is Davide Campari. He took over the business, but he didn't invent it. I'm pretty sure he was a child when it was invented. But one kind of interesting thing, and it goes hand in hand with them acquiring Aperol, is that they like really built out their business. I don't have specifics on it because it's going to take too long, but in a galleria in Milan, which is like the big fancy indoor like mall type area, he established like his first shop for it, and then they started a bar where they sold the Campari, and it kind of revolutionized that sort of culture around like having the Campari, having the bitters, and then they industrialized. They built a proper factory for production, and then they expanded pretty rapidly, it seems like. And then Davide then took over the business, and it's boomed since then.
And Davide took it over, like, I mean, he's not still in charge, is he?
No, I believe they are both dead.
Okay, sorry.
He would have taken it over in probably the early part of the 20th century.
Cool. I was wondering if this is like the longest life.
I was talking about him like he was alive.
Yeah, this guy, Davide, great dude. I mean, he's chilling out the bar still.
Okay, so are you ready to play another guessing game?
I love it. It's like Guess Who, but without all the fun pieces.
Okay, so Aperol, like we talked about, is bright orange. Campari is bright red.
If you tell me some crushed up shells are going to be in Campari,
well, that's my question. Okay. What do you think was the original coloring?
How close was I with the crushed up shells? I feel like it's going to be something weird like that.
It's pretty close. That's what I thought it was at first until I found out what it was.
Okay. Well, my guess is crushed up shells.
Okay, final answer?
Yeah.
It's actually crushed up insects.
Weirder.
Mm-hmm. So the original
Much
color, the original color is called carmine, which people use that to describe reds. It's a pigment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that came from...
Darcy's a fine artist who works in oil color, everybody. So that's how I know that.
So that came from I don't know how to say this word. Cochineal? Cochineal? Cochineal. I'm going to spell it. It's Cochineal. It's an insect, a flying insect.
Okay.
And luckily for us, because we're vegetarians, they stopped that in 2006.
Not as like far back as one would hope.
I know, right? Isn't that interesting?
I'm just like, so, but I mean, did you look up at Carmine at all? Like any history of Carmine? I'm wondering like how was it? I mean, it's been used for a pigment for like years and years and years and years and years, or like.
Oh yeah, it's very old.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just they want a red color, and they went to the trusted true method of red coloring, which was at the time instead of red dye number 5 or whatever.
I'm also guessing they probably just had these insects.
Well, that's what I'm like. Did they like add some crushed up insects, or was it like there was a wholesale supplier of like red dye, and they just happened to be?
It was probably that.
That's what
it was probably what people used to dye things that color red
instead of like
and it was edible.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Because I don't know that much about artificial dyes, but I don't know that they would have had an artificial food dye in the 1860 when it was invented.
At least not like food safe.
Yeah.
I mean, it might have colored
There's a little bit of mercury.
Yeah, it's gonna be delicious.
So in addition to the insects for the red coloring in the original recipe, Campari is like any other bitter. It's got a bunch of herbs in it. It's also, we both know it's citrusy, but specifically it comes from Chinotto, which is the bitter citrus.
Orange.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Exactly. And something that I find odd is that it has this thing called cascarilla, which is a bark, but it's native to the Caribbean.
For flavor or for coloring?
For flavor.
For flavor.
Yeah. And I don't know how that got to Italy and why it was in this 1860 recipe. It's just interesting.
Yeah. Because I mean, I guess in 1860 there's plenty of trade, hopefully, with the Caribbean. Because I'm thinking like there's a famous gum in Sicily, and it's eucalyptus, I think, but it's based off their trade with Australia. It's like that's not a thing. It's just it was
that's fascinating.
one of the imported things that they brought from Australia was this eucalyptus, and like gum, eucalyptus, perfect. Or like maybe not gum, maybe it's lozenges, but it's something very specific to Sicily, even though that thing does not grow there at all. It's same thing with Barcelona and the palm trees. All those palm trees are from Florida. From like when then Florida was quote unquote discovered.
That's a good point.
Recently after
it could be the same with the insects too. Maybe whoever was trading brought the red insect
some random
powder
things.
And these bark.
It's Is it any at all related to sarsaparilla? It has the rilla at the end.
Maybe. I
Could be.
don't know. I didn't
Probably
do
we're
enough
naming
herb
things like that.
research on it.
Sarsaparilla is a root, right? That's why you get the root beer, sarsaparilla soda.
But I mean, imagine if the whole plant's called sarsaparilla, it could, and it depends also if that's on its like origin name or that's like its fun
local name.
Yeah.
So anybody listening, don't go eating plants that we talk about because we're not really sure if they're edible.
Yeah, we're not the authority on how and which part of plants you can eat. Plants can be dangerous.
For sure.
Okay, so Campari it's a bitter, it's citrusy, and it's got herbs which are undisclosed. No longer has the insects, but does by all accounts still have the cascarilla.
Interesting.
Okay, now let's get into what we were talking about earlier about the not the branding, but the line extensions, if you will. That's not what they are.
I like that though. Yeah.
Campari is used in many other drinks, and I did not know this until
Like mixed drinks or like prepackaged? Okay, like not
cocktails.
like prepackaged drinks.
Well, okay, so interesting that you ask.
Oh.
Whenever we were at one of the bars not recently, a few months ago, you and I picked up this cute little bottle, and it said Mito.
Yes, that was about 2 years ago.
Okay, I thought it was more recently.
Milano Torino.
Exactly, that is Campari and vermouth.
Interesting.
So Milano Campari, Torino vermouth.
Oh, I did not know this.
And that is a classic old drink. It's probably turn of the century, 19th.
Before drinks got like really good. It's
No,
a
it is
joke. I
really
just don't like vermouth. I bought a bottle of vermouth once thinking like, ooh, I'll sip vermouth. And I realized nobody should sip vermouth. Like, what a weird thing to sip. It is not a good drink. That's really probably put in like not margaritas, martinis. Man.
Okay, so
Nobody should trust me around alcohol. I don't know what I'm doing.
So they had the Mito, which is the Milano Torino mashup of Campari and vermouth. And then somebody was like, you know what? That's a little bit much for me. How about we be like those Germans and kind of make it a spritz? But we're not going to call it that. We're going to call it an Americano, inexplicably.
I love that. They're like, I need to like weaken this. What else is weak? Americans. And then that was what they went with. They're like, it feels
Totally
like a burn
fair,
and like just like shots fired for no reason. It's like, I need to weaken this drink. Oh, like the Americans. Well, like, to be fair, they do the Americano coffee, is a weakened version of coffee. So then they'd be like, we're doing what the Americans do to coffee, ruining it. I realize that most of our listeners are Americans. So are we. I'm just...
It's a self-burn.
It's a self-burn.
So the Americano is Campari, vermouth, soda water, garnished with an orange slice or a lemon.
Okay, so it's Mito with just a little little lemon, soda water, like spritzed into it.
It is almost exactly what an Americano is for coffee. Like you said, it's the water with the coffee. It's same thing, the Mito with water.
Huh. Very cool.
I know. And then, here's where somebody went a little crazy, I think. So, do you want to guess what year this man walks onto the stage, the proverbial stage, and does something crazy?
Do I have any idea what he might be doing that's crazy? Do I get a hint?
He's inventing a drink.
Okay. Do I get to know what's in the drink?
Not yet.
Because I don't want to guess like pre-1850 if Campari's in the drink.
This is how the succession. 1860 Campari is invented. Then later, the Mito is invented, Campari vermouth. Then after that, the Americano's invented. And the Mito came around probably turn of the century.
Okay.
So this is after that.
Okay. So this could be around like 1919, same year as Aperol, basically.
Ding, 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 ding.
Oh.
Exact same year. So the same year that Aperol was invented in Padua.
Okay.
This drink, this cocktail, was invented in Florence. There we go. Oh. Okay. So here comes Count Camille? Oh, my handwriting is bad. I'm going to check it. Negroni.
Darcy's least favorite drink.
I hate them. And this man was like, you know what I love? I love an Americano. What's in an Americano? Just for my brain refresher. Campari, vermouth, soda water. But you know what? That's too American for me. It's got too much water in it. Instead, what are we going to put in it? Gin. Brilliant.
I love it.
I find it disgusting.
But I like he like unwatered it down. He was like, that was too watered down. No, that was disgusting. Wrong turn. So we were talking Campari Vermouth Gin.
Yeah, that's a Negroni.
Interesting.
Invented in 1990.
1919?
1919. Sorry. Did I say 1990?
Yeah, that's a very recent count. Very recent Aperol. Interesting.
I know. Gross.
You don't like the Negroni, though. I mean, have you had a good one?
I had one and it was disgusting.
I know. I haven't had a good one either. But also, I don't like vermouth. I like Campari. I like gin.
That's what it is. I don't like vermouth. It's like, it's acrid to me. Mm-hmm. Like, it's too many. It's the like you said, Campari. Yeah. That vibes with gin. I get that. Similar, they got herbs going on.
And bitters. Yeah,
exactly.
Love it.
But then you put the vermouth in there. Vermouth is just like, bleh.
Yeah, not a fan.
I'm not a fan. But that's just my opinion. If you love Negronis, I still love you. Yes. I just don't want a Negroni. I'll get another drink when we go out to a bar, you know?
I like that. Boundaries. This is really good. Setting some firm boundaries.
Okay. So, the last aperitivo on our list is Prosecco.
Have we missed the Sbagliato? You feel like you skipped? The Negroni Sbagliato, is it?
Yeah, I did. We did miss that. And we're back. Like I never forgot to write that down. So the Negroni Sbagliato, and it's a fun thing in Italian whenever they like change a recipe or something, they just say like mistaken, which is what Sbagliato means. So the Negroni Sbagliato is Campari, vermouth, and sparkling wine, sometimes Prosecco, instead of gin.
Interesting.
So still
So they
weird.
took out the good thing, the gin, and they put in sparkling wine, which kind of feels like...
In all of these drinks are vermouth.
I don't like
which
that.
Which is a sticking point for
it
both
really
of us.
Is. I'm not even sure where vermouth is from. I don't like
it's
that.
It's from Torino.
What? Is it like originally from Torino?
I don't know.
In my mind, it sounds French, because like vermouth. Like, and
be.
no Italian word ends in a TH.
It could be.
No Italian word ends in an H.
You know what? It comes up so much in these drinks with the Campari.
That you're like just trusted to be like, you're like, no.
Yeah, well, I don't think about vermouth being cocktails in Italy.
The modern versions.
It's the Campari.
Torino, Italy. Sorry, 18th
there
century.
We go.
Late 18th century. So, okay, there you go. Traditionally used for medicinal purposes.
Yeah, because it's disgusting.
Yes, and then it became an aperitif in Torino. Wow, that's terrible. I mean, I realize people listening, I'm so sorry if I'm insulting you. If you're like, that's like my favorite thing to drink, I am so sorry. It is... we honestly maybe should bad vermouth. Maybe we should try a different vermouth.
Maybe we've had bad vermouth. Let's say that and try some more drinks.
Interestingly, by the way, I don't know if you read this on the Aperol. I'll just bring it up now, much later than it should be. But do you know why it's called Aperol?
Is it based on aperitif?
It is. French? Yes. Yeah. The two brothers wanted, it was actually Aperol, A-P-E-R-O, and apparently they wanted it to sound French, like what the French would have, an Aperol.
It's funny, that came up as a theme for both the Aperol and Campari as brands. They both had different points in their marketing history where they literally used words like fancy or luxe or luxurious. Like they were really trying to be like, y'all, this is the fancy drink.
Yeah.
Please drink it.
I like that though. I mean, it's funny. It's like, I'm just thinking like the French, it's often viewed as like a fancy thing. Like, oh, it's French. Like even here, I think, oh, it's French. That must be fancy. So I think that's kind of a funny, like, I mean, I feel like then you get to France and that's not at all the vibe. I feel like that's here, like, it's like made in Italy.
The French think they're fancy though.
That's a good point. Well, I was thinking like in America, when you see made in Italy, you're like, that's probably amazing. And you get to Italy and you see made in Italy, like, I'm not buying that. I do not trust it. It's probably garbage. You see like made in Germany, you're like, that's probably good.
What? Don't tell people that. I buy made in Italy all the time.
I know, but it's always like the weird plastic things.
Our mocha, our coffee maker, Bialetti, that's made in Italy.
That's a very fair point. Bialetti is still made in Italy. But I'm thinking like our pans and stuff are made in like Czech Republic.
Okay, but some of our favorite bowls for eating dinner and pasta are made in Italy.
Very good point. 2 for 2.
Some of our best cooking spoons
are not Italian, I don't think. The wooden ones aren't.
Okay, thought those were Italian.
I think those are IKEA. I think those are like Croatia or something.
Okay, let's move on.
Yes, that's fair.
So we're going to talk about Prosecco.
Your favorite drink.
We
went from the least favorite
Prosecco
to the favorite. I love this. This is a journey, y'all listening. This is like an emotional journey for Darcy.
Okay, so the Aperol is liqueur. The Campari is a bitter, which is also a liqueur, right? Mm-hmm. That's okay. Before we move on, just one kind of, maybe it's interesting to people who are like bartendery. All the drinks that I've listed up until the Prosecco, the Aperol spritz, Campari, the Mito, the I believe. The Americano for sure and the Negroni are all, what is it? The BTA? Let me look it up.
BTA behind the, I don't know what BTA stands for. It could be that. It's kind of scary.
Sorry, IBA, the International Bartenders Association. They're all recognized drinks by the IBA, which I'd never heard of before, and it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's a neat. I mean, it makes sense. It's like I don't know if that means like stuff you should know how to make. I don't know what IBA is, but it sounds kind of cool.
Okay, so let's.
To be fair, though, sorry, I'm interrupting you. But how do you like invent? I'm always like the Aperol spritz. It seems like I invented it. I'm like, no, you didn't. You mixed two things you had in your fridge together. That's not inventing. That's like the screwdriver. It seems like I invented it. I'm like, no, you took orange juice and you're like, what if this were alcoholic? And you put alcohol with no flavor into it, and then you found vodka on your shelf and like, that's the alcohol with no flavor. That's not like you don't get to make. I don't know. I feel like that's such a cop out, because I feel like today everyone's like, oh, it's hard to invent anything. I'm like, yes, because every drink now is like 18 ingredients. All of these were invented by
light-skinned men who were probably could write and were wealthy, and they could say that.
But they're also watering down their drinks.
Yeah. So what does that mean about them?
I'm like the wine that you mixed like dirt into, and then like 4 different kind of mushrooms. I'm like, that's a drink. Nobody would think of that. But then you're like, I had Campari and I had, gin. I mixed them together and it was really good. I'm like, of course it was good. You were drunk. Of course it was good. I don't know. I always feel like nowadays, and you have to like, I'm seeing those drink shows. They're like, I don't know. There's one of them on Netflix where they had I can't remember what it's called, like Bartender Off or something like that. Came at a weird time where it was like using really expensive ingredients, but they kept fat washing everything.
Is it something mixologist something?
Could be something like that. But it was just one of those ones that like they had to make a drink and it was like 14 ingredients. They had that little smoke injector. They have fat like washing.
Freeze-dried flowers on top.
What is that about?
Yeah.
And then you have like, you go back 70 years ago and somebody's mixing 2 things that everybody has on their shelf. And they're like, oh, God, it's brilliant. This Count guy is like off the chain. Brilliant. Sorry, please continue. Okay. Prosecco.
So Prosecco is from the Trieste province. It's named after the village Prosecco. And Trieste, so the drinks that we've been talking about so far are all from northern Italy. Torino is the farthest west. And then there's Milano, and Florence is a little bit farther south, but basically center of the country. Venice is... We didn't really talk about Venice, but it's over...
Kind of do with Aperol. It's east. Yeah.
Yeah.
Venice is
over east. And then... Trieste is even farther east.
It's, I think, the last major town or city you get to before you get to Slovenia.
Yes, I believe that is the country. Mm-hmm.
And it used to be... I can't remember if it was part of Slovenia was Italy or part of Italy was Slovenia, but there was, it's kind of like...
It doesn't look like it should be in Italy. It's this odd little tiny, like...
Yeah.
Little sliver of the country that kind of looks like it belongs in a different country.
Or Italy had more at one point, and that was less weird looking because it's kind of strange.
But nevertheless, Prosecco is from Trieste. And it was named after the village of, do you want to guess?
Prosecco.
I
think you might have mentioned that a minute ago.
I think I did.
But it was a good guess. I think I still pride myself on that.
Okay, so here's the thing. I think we should get into this more in another episode.
Sure.
Because Prosecco it's got a lot going on. I mean, classic wines do, it's kind of neat. It was easy for me to go through the cocktails because they're pretty simple and they have pretty basic recent history. The thing with Prosecco is that it's old. I guess Prosecco, as we know it, is not that old, but it's got ancient roots. So what I will say today is that in the 1500s, there was a local wine called Ribolla.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Ribolla. Ribolla.
Okay.
Ribolla. And people claimed at the time that it was a recreation of this thing called Puccinian wine, or I have to look at my notes really closely, a wine called Puccinum, which seems Latin. So
if I had to guess,
it was an old grape or wine, and this Puccinum wine was loved by Pliny the Elder.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And Livia, who was the wife of Emperor Augustus. So that was like BC to AD times. Like that was old.
And do we know if it was also carbonated back then, or was it a flat wine?
I think it was a flat wine. I mean, I don't know.
Because I know young wines are carbonated, so I don't know if it's like...
And it could be that, but we really need to get like really deep into it, I think, in another episode, because there's so much about it. But what I know for now is that was very, very ancient. And then in the 1500s, they were like, I heard about this pretty dope wine that, Pliny the Elder liked back in the day. Let's recreate it. And they did. And that was called Ribolla. And then here's the thing. So this English guy comes into town, and this was later, and he tries this wine, and he claims that the Puccinium wine, that kind of grape, they are now calling it Prosecco, but Prsecho.
Just butchering the spelling there, aren't they?
I know, it's weird, right? But it didn't have the name before. Written wise, until this English guy wrote it down. Yeah, so who knows how the Italians were spelling it. But then later
probably not like that, for being honest.
Then later it was written Prosecco.
Which is interesting because do you know how to say dry?
Secco.
So I'm wondering if it's of course you do. You speak Italian better than I do. But I thought it'd be fun, give and take here. So I'm wondering if it's related at all, or if it's just a very dry area.
Well, there's a town called Prosecco.
Yeah.
So like chicken or the egg. Did the wine name Prosecco come before the town was named Prosecco? I don't think so.
Probably not.
We need to do a deeper dive into this, but I wanted to kind of roughly go over Prosecco because it's a great thing to order for an aperitivo.
It's also very interesting because that region is typically experiences a lot of flooding in the about this time of year, like early summer, late summer, when there's a lot of like summer storms, hot air from the desert meeting the cold air of the Arctic. It comes together, creates major flooding. You always read about it, like in that area, South Tyrol and Veneto and Trieste and things like that. But Prosecco is a place that often gets flooding, and they're having to do a lot of figuring out how to preserve the Prosecco vines, because essentially there's always been storms, but now they're getting fiercer and stronger, and that mixed with the fact that like historically you would have the vines potentially under fig trees or under other kinds of trees, or arranged in a way that it wouldn't destroy the land. It wouldn't basically kind of be a monoculture. And they're realizing that, unfortunately, because it's a monoculture, and because I think we've talked about this in one episode, when it's rain, you're not allowed to pick grapes basically just after it's rained. Like you have to wait for the ground to dry, because if you go too soon, you risk damaging the roots by walking on top of the ground. So there's the whole thing there. So I don't know how deep. I assume some of the roots go very deep, but I can't imagine all of them do, because even when it gets to freeze, I know that like France is out there with helicopters and torches and fires to try to keep
keep it warm.
Yeah.
But I imagine the trees too, whenever people were doing possibly smaller productions, that if they were olive trees or any kind of tree, it provided cover, but it also provided some stability in the land. Do they experience mudslides, right?
Because that's the big thing. The fig trees are now that people have planted them and they're a couple years old at this point, they're preventing mudslides because it's deeper roots and binding it together better. But also because it's preventing the leaves from burning. Interestingly enough, because in the summer,
the leaves of the grapevines
from burning, and the fruit from basically it. Because not just the leaves, but also the flowers and stuff like that. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. I read an article like a couple months ago about it. How people are trying to. It's one of those things that's like, I don't know. It's you. I mean, you and I think complain about this a lot, because it's like the idea that there was a way to do something, and then somebody comes along and says, no, there's a much better way to do it. So it's like, and this is monoculturing Prosecco, and then you realize 20 years later, like,
that completely messed up everything with the.
This is why they did it with the trees and the this and the that. It's like they didn't do that for a reason. And I think now, especially, it's just again that's funny little things that like, especially being in south of Italy, we see that often as people are kind of like, no, we've done this for hundreds of years because the other methods didn't work, and boy did we have time to try the other methods. No, it's fascinating though. I didn't realize that Prosecco is that old. Because there's a couple grapes in Italy that are ancient, that are like arguably, and some even where we are, there people wonder like if the Greeks brought it or if they were already here. Right. No, that's fascinating though. That's that old.
So I think we should get more into it, because it really is. There's so much about it, and about wines. I mean, neither of us are like sommeliers or anything, but I am interested in Prosecco, and we could get deeper into it.
And if you're done with that, one thing I did want to bring up is beer very briefly.
Yeah.
It's not something we talked about, I think, at the beginning of the episode, but I realized I mentioned that you like to drink beer as well. And I am not as big, I think, a beer drinker as you, but only in the sense that, like, in the States, I really like the weird beers. I like cider. Like, oh my God, I loved it when we were in Scotland and
in France.
in
France has good cider.
Oh my, we're just constantly drinking cider, like apple cider, hard apple cider, but it's just called cider. Where else, I guess? No, but like in the States, I'm thinking like every time they come out with a passion fruit guava orange one, I'm like, that sounds awesome.
Or like the banana bread beer.
Yeah,
like
I'm like, this sounds. I'll try that. So I like the weird ones, but when it's like, this is beer flavor, I'm like, that's cool. And then after like one beer, I'm like, that was plenty, thank you.
Yeah, Italian beers are beer flavor.
And I wanted to mention that because there are a couple. Peroni is a classic. You get that in the States, obviously. There's Nastro Azzurro, which just stands for Blue Ribbon. So it's kind of like PBR, Pabst Blue Ribbon, but it's Peroni Blue Ribbon. Same PBR too. I mean, in the sense of same letters.
Same letters, but very different company. Very different beers. Different, taste.
Yeah. But they are kind of working on a rebranding even here. Because it used to be you'd order the Peroni and you get the brown bottle, red label, or you'd order the Nastro and you get the green bottle and a white label with blue letters. And now Peroni, or I guess it's like, in the States, I think we realized that it's harder to find Peroni. Mm-hmm. A lot of it has a big Peroni and then very small letters somewhere, Nastro Azzurro. I'm like, oh, they don't even sell like the original Peroni here. Mm-hmm. And then even at like bars and stuff now, instead of having Nastro Azzurro in these large letters and having Peroni somewhere small, it's Peroni in large letters. That's not that important to this podcast. I just think it's fascinating that Peroni is doing probably what Campari and Aperol doing and trying to change it to be like, no. We need to show this market share.
Mm-hmm. Brand recognition.
There is Birra Moretti. Mm-hmm. That's another one that kind of tastes like, I mean, it's a slightly nicer version of Peroni in my opinion. And then there's like Birra Ignusa, which is from Sardinia. A lot of people like it. It's non-filtered. It's kind of a nice little flavor. It's a fun beer. There's Birra Messina, which is from Sicily. And the reason I mention all this is because one of the tragedies of beer everywhere is that they're only owned by a few companies. I think that Peroni is owned by Asahi, the Japanese beer company. Moretti, Ignusa, and Messina are all owned by Heineken. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple others, like Menabrea, actually, which is a northern beer from Menabrea. They're owned by an Italian company, which is kind of cool. And it's not like they change things too much or anything. It's not like they're changing recipes or things like that.
No, but it is a bummer that it's a giant corporate or like an international corporation rather than a small Italian.
Yeah. And I think, well, especially because again, that sort of thing, like in the States, there's so many small breweries, and a lot of them haven't bought up like Budweiser or Anheuser-Busch, if that's not the same company as Budweiser, because that's what they do. They buy up like small little things to get that market share in the small areas. But no, it's like if you're coming here for beer culture, this is all to say there isn't much beer culture in Italy. There is like, I mean, you drink Peroni and then the bartender up there, she always jokes with you that it's like, oh, it's like the workman's beer. It's like, it's just like the classic beer. And it's not bad. It's just not mind blowing.
No, it's just beer flavored.
Yeah. So I guess this all to say is like, Italy has phenomenal wine culture.
Yes.
A fledgling, but hopefully one day robust a cocktail culture, but not like really any beer culture. There's still some small breweries and stuff like that are trying, but it's still like, even we have these like small breweries or weird beers or something like that, they all still taste vaguely the same.
Yeah. There is the Birra Rossa, which is red beer. Which we must have in the States.
We do. We call it something else. I think it's not amber, but we call it something. Maybe we call it amber.
It's not amber ale. That's different.
Yeah, but we call it something.
But it's nice.
Yeah.
Peroni has a version of it. I mean, a lot of like the bigger brand, a lot of the big brands will have a version of it. They don't always have it at bars, but you can get it at the grocery store. I
was gonna say, you mentioned Peroni has it. Almost all those big companies do have like a Bionda, the blonde, the Rosso, and then like a dark one, Scuro or something like that. They just have like a dark beer.
It is really nice. Like when you go out for dinner, especially to pizza restaurants, they'll have beer on tap, which is Birra alla Spina, and they will often have a blonde and usually a red. Sometimes they'll have a dark beer. And that's pretty fun. That's different.
Beer pizza is classic, even in this country. It's classic in every country, I think. But no, and that's just to as somebody who's, if you listen to this, wondering if there's other drinks, because I know that like some people are more beer drinkers than cocktails or wine. It's just not much of a thing here. It's like, don't get your hopes up for anything more than Peroni. Yeah. And then Dreher, that's the other one, Dreher. That's from, I think it's from Valdosta or somewhere in the north. And that's also owned by Heineken. So they're just, unfortunately, they're all kind of like bought up and owned by larger companies, which, again, doesn't change anything. It's just like...
It's a bummer, though.
Yeah, a lot of times like, oh, man, I wanted an Italian beer tonight.
I will say, though, that there are a lot of after dinner drinks, like digestive drinks and Amaros, that are often made locally. Like a lot of places, I mean, even like we talked about in another episode, restaurants and families will make their own Amaro and their own limoncello, like all over the country. And a lot of towns have specific dark, after dinner drinks that are specific to that town and quite old. And then in addition to that, just being made in people's homes and small restaurants, a lot of towns will have a small production from a local group of people who are making a liqueur, after dinner drink. So that has a pretty strong industry, I guess. Heritage, compared to the beer, for sure.
So if you're coming, I mean, and then again, that's more for somebody who either wants beer, or if you're somebody who wants to try local products, I would go, as you mentioned, the Amaro, the wine. A lot of wine is local,
of course.
Either made in-house at a restaurant or just made like close by. So that's a big thing. But is that everything for cocktails?
Yeah.
Or we're going to do deep dives later, I think, because these are fascinating. People might find it interesting. If you find it interesting, this is a nice segue. If you find it interesting, please leave a comment if this is something you want to hear more about. Like if you're curious about, as you can tell, neither of us are like bartenders. The closest I've been is a server. But I mean, the first time somebody ordered an old fashioned, I was like, I have no idea what that is, and I had to write it down the closest I could. I'm like, old fashioned. Is that one word or two? What is that? It's like I couldn't figure it out. I had like.
Did this person have like a Southern accent or something?
I think so, but it was also like I was working at a place where they had old fashions and then had elder fashion because it was like their own twist on it, and it was like old fashioned. I'm like elfishin. So I was like, can I get an elfishin? And he's like, you have what? It's a whole thing. Every time somebody ordered a drink, I was just like, oh my god. And they're like, what do you have? Like, what kind of bottles do you have? I'm like, I have no idea. I think there's whiskey. I'm not sure. There might be other drinks too. Would you like one? I was really good with food, terrible with alcohol. So that's all to say, if this kind of stuff that was interesting to you, if you're like, oh yeah, I'd love to, mindly listen to some interesting deep dives on like certain drinks or certain like Fernet or something like that, we'd be happy to do that. Or anything else like that. We're kind of, we realize we really enjoy doing deep dives on certain things, whether it's the islands or whether it's locations or food or this and that and the other thing. So if that's something that you also find interesting, please let us know with a comment or an email at onlyabagofficial@gmail.com. You can also send us a Instagram message, only_a_bag. And then, of course, onlyabag.com is our website. We have a little contact box if you'd like to use that. I feel like a flight attendant when I do this.
It's cool, right?
Because they always like come around like now, like if you'd like to sign up for a credit card, you can do so at pleasesponsorus.com/credit card. Just in case one of the airlines want to sponsor this. So yeah, if you have any questions, any comments, concerns, if you'd like to leave a review, a rating, we would deeply appreciate it. If you'd like to follow us, subscribe,
recommend us to your friends.
Recommend us. Like it's like really a big thing. Like honestly, like I think that sort of I don't know, word of mouth is huge. If you have people who are like, oh, they're going to go to Italy, they should listen to this, and they like podcasts. No, I think it's great because I think we I don't know. I think people just like learning information from somebody who potentially isn't necessarily paid to give that information. I mean, I'd love to be paid to give that information. I just meant like I was thinking. Like,
I love podcasts and learning about random things.
Well, that's not the thing. I'm just mean like sometimes you Google stuff and it's like always a sponsored list of things, and you're like,
oh yeah, I hate that.
I wanted an actual list. So, thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
And thank you, Darcy, for a lovely deep dive onto some cocktails.
You're very welcome.
That was I think I learned a lot, especially about bug shells. So I'm gonna go back to forgetting about that now, and enjoy my red number 40 or whatever it is.
Exactly. I think it's like red dye 115 or something. I think there's a 5 in it.
Fancy. They veered off the classic colors.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. That's it for now. Yeah.
And we'll come back with probably the next episode. I realize, I don't know, is it 31 days or 30 days in July?
I don't know.
So either way, the next episode will not be on food because we've kind of finished. We realized that we're only putting out like 4 episodes a month, I feel like, on different topics, regardless of how many Wednesdays there are in that month. Now that I'm realizing the issue in the plan.
Next month we'll be here with a new topic.
Well, next Wednesday we'll be here. And I don't know if next Wednesday is the 31st or not.
Okay.
But it won't be food.
Wednesday.
So anyway, thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next Wednesday.